In this video, I'm going to show you the ultimate foolproof way to get an incredible acoustic guitar recording. One that sounds just as good as this.
Your love was like a locked and loaded gun. Now I'm left for dead. To you I'm just another one. 'Cause you played me like a game. You changed up.
So let's get started. So the first thing that's worth mentioning before we even think about hitting the record button is make sure that your acoustic guitar sounds as good as it possibly can do just playing it in the room. So make sure it's got fresh strings on, make sure that there's no buzzy frets. If it has got any buzzy frets, take it for a setup, adjust the intonation, whatever you need to do, just get it sounding as good as you possibly can do beforehand. Today I'm using this small diaphragm condenser microphone. It's the WA84 by Warm Audio. It's an absolutely exceptional sounding microphone, particularly for acoustic guitar, and it's also pretty affordable. However, if you don't have one of these, then that doesn't matter one little bit. Just use whatever you have got access to. Ideally that will be a condenser microphone. It might be a small diaphragm or a large diaphragm, but ultimately if all you have right now is a Shure SM58, that is fine. Just use the principles in this video as a starting point, apply them, and you will still get a very, very good acoustic guitar sound. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the microphone up about a foot or 30 centimeters away from the guitar. That's going to be our starting point, and we're going to point it towards the 12th fret. From there, we can adjust as we need, but that's always going to be the starting point. A really common mistake I see with people miking up acoustic guitars is that they will put it in front of the sound hole. The logic here is to think, well, that's where the sound's coming from, so that's the part that I'm going to mic up. When in actual fact, it's probably the worst part of the acoustic guitar that you could point a microphone at. It's going to sound really, really boomy. It's going to sound muddy and just overall unbalanced and not very pleasant. The 12th fret is a really nice balance in terms of tone, in terms of the top end sparkle and the low end, but we can adjust it as we need to. From there, we've got some scope to change the sound of things a little bit. If what you're hearing at this point is a bit too bright and you want a bit more body and a bit more low end, then you can point the microphone more towards the sound hole. The more you do that, the more of that low end and that boom it's going to pick up. Another option which you could do, this is not my preferred option, but it still works. Most microphones, particularly cardioid microphones like this, have what's called proximity effect, which gives you a bass boost the closer they are. So if that's not working for you, pointing it towards the sound hole, you could experiment bringing it a little bit closer in. If the opposite is true, if it's a bit too boomy and you want to kind of tame some of that low end, either you could push it back a little bit, but bear in mind, the further the microphone is away, that is going to introduce more room sound, and if you're not in a well-treated room, you could start picking up some echoes. Or the other alternative would be to point the microphone in front of the 12th fret, just pointing it away from that sound hole where the boominess is coming from. So from there, you're just going to play the guitar, you're going to be listening in your headphones, and you're going to be recording little snippets, listening through your monitors, and then just adjusting the microphone until you've got a sound that you're happy with. I'm going to show you the process of miking up 3 different acoustic guitars. One that is super high-end and expensive, one that is mid-range, and one that is absolute bargain basement. But most importantly, showing you how using this one foolproof method can always get you a great sounding acoustic guitar recording. Now, this guitar is a Taylor 814. It's an extremely high-end guitar. It's my favorite guitar in the entire world. Taylors overall are really, really well-balanced guitars in terms of their tone, but if anything, they tend to be on the bright side. So if I was recording this for a really simple acoustic guitar and singer with nothing else, then I might want to point this microphone a bit towards the sound hole just to get some more body in there. If this was for a dense pop rock mix, then it's probably going to be fine where it is because I don't want all that low end just taking up space in the mix. Okay, moving on, we've now got this acoustic guitar, which is a Martin DC-1E. It's kind of in the mid-range for Martin, really. And one of the most notable things about this is that Martin guitars inherently have way more low end. They've got a huge amount of lows and low mids, whereas Taylor's are a little bit tamer on the bottom and they tend to be a bit brighter. Martins are quite mellow and they've got this huge low end. So almost certainly we don't want this microphone pointing anywhere near the sound hole. As usual, we go for our same starting point, about a foot away, 30 centimeters, pointing at the 12th fret. If that's a little bit too boomy, which for this guitar it is, then we've got two options. We can either move the microphone slightly down the fretboard, so in front of the 12th fret, or we can move it away. I'm going to go for moving it a little bit further away, so we're probably about 35 to 40 centimeters away now. This is a well-treated room, so that's absolutely fine. If you're not in a particularly well-treated room, then you may get a better result keeping it close but moving it away from the sound hole, essentially. Or you could experiment with putting some blankets or some cushions or something behind you where the microphone is pointing. That could work as well. Okay, so let's go for a take. Now, the next guitar is an interesting one. This is a super old, super cheap Tanglewood. I don't even know the model number. It cost a couple of £100, brand new. And just to add to the nastiness, it's got Nashville tuned strings on it. If you're not familiar with Nashville strings or Nashville tuning, it's basically the alternate 6 strings on a 12-string guitar. And it can sound really, really great in pop music, country music, particularly when you blend one of these guitars in with a normal 6-string acoustic. It sounds like a 12-string, but you've got a little bit more control. But on its own, it's a bit nasty because it's super, super cheap, it's a bit rattly, and it's got these super high-tuned Nashville strings on it. However, we can still get a decent recording of it using the same principle. So, starting point, a foot away, 30 centimeters, pointing at the 12th fret. However, the low end on this guitar is almost non-existent, so we need to compensate for that. So I'm going to move it closer to the sound hole, and I'm also going to bring it closer in as well, because remember, the closer the microphone is, we get a bit more of that proximity effect, which is the bass boost, which can help. And also being closer to the sound hole, that adds a little bit more weight and body to the guitar sound as well. Okay, so I'm probably about 20 centimeters away. I'm in between the sound hole and the 12th fret, which is pretty extreme, but when you hear it in a moment, you'll understand why. So let's go for a take and let's see what we sound like. Now, at this point, if you are a singer-songwriter and you're writing music, it would make a ton of sense for you to download my Songwriter's Checklist. Songwriting is an art. However, despite that, there's still certain stages and processes that we have to go through every single time to make sure that our song doesn't miss the mark. Your success as a songwriter ultimately depends on your ability to get a message across to your audience and evoke some sort of response from them, whether it's an emotional or a physical response. And the way that we do that is by making sure that everything is absolutely tip-top even before we hit the record button. This is the exact same process that I go through with every single one of my production clients, and it is all mapped out on the Songwriter's Checklist. It's completely free to download, and the link is in the description below.